celebrating the power of possibility.
I'm Brent Hubbs, and I believe anything is possible.
Welcome to Anything is Possible. These are great stories about great people whose lives prove that anything is possible. And I got a great one for you today. My friend Brent Hubbs in the building. Hubbs, great to see you, sir.
It's great to see you, man. I hope you're doing well, my friend.
Well, listen, I've been in radio in Knoxville. This makes 33 years. I remember one day I look up at the radio station and I see you around. How many years ago was that?
This is my 30th football season, covering them on a day-to-day basis. I was in the building, I guess, 31 years, because I did about a half year before they found a way to give me a full-time job to go watch football practice and cover football practice. So. You had not been there long. You had the small broom closet. We had the double broom closet, and you know, where everybody was like, "Who are these people and what kind of show are they doing in this building?"
Listen, when we got started, I was part of the team that helped to launch News Talk, and we were doing News Talk and sports.
Yeah.
And Mike Keith was here. You were here, and literally when we started, they took a broom closet and turned it into a studio. I'm out of the closet now, but we started in a closet. What were you thinking back then? How did you end up there?
Well, it's interesting. I went to college with the idea of being a television producer. I wanted to direct the Final Four. That was my, quote, career goal.
Where'd that come from?
When I was 12 years old, our church had a television ministry, and a cameraman didn't show up. And the guy running it went to me and said, "Hey, I want you to run a camera." And I said, "I don't know what I'm doing." He goes, "I'll direct you through it. Just don't knock it over. If I tell you to move it a little bit left or a little bit right, do that and we're good." And we got done. I said, that was pretty cool. And I just stuck with that and kept doing that. And thought it was really cool behind the scenes, loved sports. Thought, man, it'd be awesome to direct something in sports.
Which church was this? Did you grow up here?
Yeah, it was Union Baptist Church on Washington Pike. That's the only church I've ever been a member at. We're still members there now. I'm still involved with the TV and sound there now. My kids have been raised there. It was I could ride my bike from the house to the church if I wanted to for Wednesday nights. Or if we played ball in the gym in the afternoon, we lived that close to it. Now we live about 4 miles from it, and we're still very active there.
When did this love of sports, as the old folks say, get a hold of you?
When I was young, I had the best childhood growing up, and I know people say that and everything. Loving parents, in a home. We never moved. We lived in the same house my entire life. I moved out of it when I got married. I lived in it when I went to college. We never moved. I mean, it was the only place I ever knew. And we were on a cul-de-sac. And there's about 8, 9 houses on the cul-de-sac, I guess. There were 2 girls who lived on the street, and they were about 10 years apart. Everybody else on the street were boys. There was about 10 of us. And it's the Sandlot, except we played all sports. If it was fall, we played football. If it's winter, we got a basketball. If it's spring, summer, we're playing baseball. We're playing Army in the woods. I mean, nobody went into anybody's house. We never spent the night at anybody's house. When the street light came on, it was dark, we had to go home. But as soon as we got off the school bus, Saturday mornings, as soon as you got your chores done, boys, we're meeting in the middle of the road and we're getting into something all day long. And so there were just a bunch of people in the neighborhood that love sports. And
did you have a particular sport that you loved?
Basketball was probably my favorite because I understood it better than any. I was never big enough to play football. I played tackle football in the backyard. Thankfully, those people were kind to me and didn't beat me up. I was never good enough at baseball. It was a little slow for me anyway. So basketball was kind of the one I liked the most. I liked to play it, I liked to watch it. So that was kind of the sport I sort of fell in love with first and foremost, was basketball. Now I watched the NFL and all that, but I never got to play it. Basketball I could play a little bit, so I had the Nerf hoop in the den. You know, I could imagine playing, you know, the game at night in the wintertime. So basketball was kind of my sport.
So you go to school and you decide to stay with this seed that has been germinated at church. So where does that take you?
Well, I go and I get a work study at UT for financial aid, and they put me in an office, in the broadcasting office, working with the secretary. I'm doing mailing labels, and I'm like, I need the money, but this ain't really what I'm doing. And a couple of guys come to me and said, hey, would you be interested in producing our morning radio show? I don't know anything about it. We'll figure it out. Do I get paid? Well, yeah, you can just use your work study for that. So I went to New Rock 90. Music, I had no idea what any of it was. And I worked a DJ shift as a morning show producer from 6 a.m. to 9 or 10 before I went to class. And I was behind the scenes, pushing buttons and all those types of things. From there, I got involved in some Jumbotron production, and I was on that path. And then I did a practicum with Mike Keith and got bit by the bug of knowing something before somebody else. Can you tell somebody something they don't know about a sport they're passionate about? And I got hooked. He hooked me, and the rest is history, as they say.
Possibility powered by Pilot Flying J, Covenant Health, Home Federal, and the Knoxville News Sentinel.
So you get bit by this bug of sports intel. So kind of unwind where that bug has taken you.
Well, it got me a full-time gig when Mike moved to the afternoons from 3 to 7. He went to Bobby Denton and said, I gotta have this guy as my full-time producer. And so at that point I'm entrenched. And Mike and I had a blast. I mean, we had an absolute blast from 94 through 97. And then he gets the Titans job. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do next.
Did you ever consider going with him?
No. I mean, I was Tennessee, East Tennessee to the core. My wife, there wasn't a real opportunity, because when he went out there, you know, they were still in Memphis, and it took a little time for that transition for him out there. So it didn't really work, and it wasn't really an option. Jimmy came in, and I dearly loved Jimmy and John. They were awesome. But I also knew I'm never going to get this gig. Jimmy was young, John's young. I'm going to be 50 years old, and I'm going to be producing the show. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I yearned for some more. I had a thirst for being more involved and doing more things. And there's a friend of mine named Bill Chris, who taught me and Mike how to cover recruiting. His brother Gary played at the University of Tennessee. Bill's a dear friend, still is a dear friend. And he kept telling me, you got to do one of these websites. You got to do a website. I
remember thinking how futuristic you were, because you jumped on this like way before way before, so much so that people were like, you're going to do what? Am I right about that?
Oh, absolutely. So to unwind a little bit, I ended up taking a job with a company called Rivals.
Yeah.
Bobby Burton was a national recruiting guy who was a guest on Sports Talk regularly. He called and recruited me, and I'd never been recruited for a job. I'd never been. They flew me to Seattle, bought me dinner. Man, I thought I was the big time deal, right? And so it felt right, but it was scary. My wife was employed at KUB, where she still is, so we were stable there, so I could be the risk taker. We didn't have any kids. And so I was talking to Mike about it, and he's like, man, you ought to do it. You got to do it. And I'm like, it feels right, but it's scary. He's like, you should do it. So I went in and I told Bobby Denton what I was going to do. And say, well, I'm proud of you. When it doesn't work, you'll have a spot here.
That was
essentially.
Bobby, man.
If it doesn't work, you can come back. And I remember I called Mike that morning when I went to see Bobby because I was emotional. Because we had invested so much in sports talk that I was emotional driving to work to resign. Now I had a job, I had a better job. I was going to get paid more. You should be excited. But I was walking away from something that had been my life for years. But I stepped into something that became my life and has for 23 years now. And I've been blessed beyond measure to get to do what I get to do. It's not a job, truly.
We were right there at the inception of News Talk and Sports 30 whatever years it was ago. There was a buzz, there was an energy with you guys. I know I had it. Every day we were trying to do the very best work we could possibly do. You could feel it.
Yep.
There was no lethargy. Every show was like, we gotta tell people, we gotta make a great show. Yeah. I loved being in that environment.
Yeah. There was never a get through the day.
Never.
It was never, how are we gonna get through the last hour? That was never, and I credit, for me, I credit Mike for that.
Man, he lived with the foot on the pedal.
Oh, yeah.
He didn't let up.
And what he taught me, the biggest thing that everybody asks me, what did you learn in that experience? I learned relationships. I learned that, look, if you I didn't have a booming voice. I still don't, right? I mean, Bobby wouldn't let me on the air at IBK for 5 years, it seemed like. I had to take voice lessons and the whole 9 yards, because it was a big deal to get to be on IBK.
Big deal.
But what Mike taught me was beyond being able to sit there and talk when the on-air light came on. To know things, to understand things, you gotta have relationships with people. He would take me to campus. We would go for lunch, and then we would go to campus at 1 o'clock, shows at 3, park the car, and we would walk through buildings and campus, and he would introduce me to people. You need to know this person. Get to know this person. And it was all about relationships. And you know what? People say, what's the key to your job now?
Relationships.
That's the only way you're successful.
So from Rivals, you go where?
The original company went out of business. About 18 months in, I thought, I've made a huge mistake. A guy named Shannon Terry bought up the assets and restarted Rivals. Then he sold it to Yahoo. And I stayed with Rivals until September 1, 2022. And Shannon restarted a company called On3, and based out of Nashville, and kind of put the band back together. And when the guy who gave you your career calls and says, hey, let's do this one more time. Let's do this last one together. I said, no. He said, come to the house, let's talk. And I went to his house, and we talked for 3 or 4 hours, and I walked out and I said, this is where I'm going. I'm gonna make this move, and this will be my last stop, whenever that is. I have no plans to retire, but I'm home. And again, it's about the relationship. I wanted to work with him again because of the relationship we had. We never stopped talking. When he left and started another company, he and I always stayed in touch. And you go and you align yourself with the people you're most comfortable with. And that's where I am, and that's why I'm with him.
Relationships really create possibility, but you also, I hear you on game day.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, Brent, man, you do a fabulous job. First of all, you are crisp and informative. When they come to you on the sideline, I don't know if you got 5 seconds, 7 seconds, 10 seconds, but I mean, it's just, you sound great, man.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, it's easy to sound better when you're passionate about doing something. I'm passionate about being a part of that broadcast in the Vault Network. I grew up listening to it on the radio. My grandfather, who was my hero, as a kid. I mean, I'm in tow. I mean, Dad and Granddad. I mean, we're at the lake, we're fishing. We were in tow, and that one resonated with him. When I said, "Hey, I'm on the Vol Network." Whoa. He had no idea what Volquest was or the computer or any of that other stuff. But wait a minute, you're on the Vol Network?
You mean the one where they go, natural gas?
Yes. Right? You know, I mean, and so, I mean, it's a real sense of pride. And those guys, Steve Early and Bob Kessling, those guys, you know, continue to give me opportunities, you know, and you just try to run with them. And, you know, I wake up some days and it's like, you know, you walk to the stadium on a cool, crisp fall morning and you're the first one in there and it's the calm before the storm. That big cathedral's quiet, but you know it's going to become its own city in a few hours. Are you kidding me? I get to do that? I mean, I do. The guy who went to college to be a producer who was told you can't be on the radio because your voice wasn't good enough. Wait a minute, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to talk about what I'm seeing in the game and give observations to fans listening out there around the world? Me? I mean, how did I fall into this?
How did you feel about people saying that about your voice?
They were right. I mean,
I don't know that I've ever, and I've interviewed a lot of people. I don't know that I've ever interviewed anybody that took that kind of feedback constructively enough to just literally go, no, they were right.
Yeah. Listen, I'm from Corryton, Tennessee, okay, in East Tennessee. I'm not Midwestern. I don't have a Midwestern voice.
That's what I like about it,
There are words I have to be careful with. But I had so much help along the way that nobody said, you're awful. They all said, you need some work. Let's help you. So Mr. Dick, God rest his soul, never came to me and said, you'll never be on my air, you're not good enough. He said, let me help you. We're going to bring in this voice coach. Bobby Denton said, hey, you can't be on right now, but let's get you to where you can be. So there was nobody killed the dream. The possibility, as you like to say, remained. John Wilkerson, we did Saturday Sports Talk. John Wilkerson and I did it. And John would come in on Saturday and he'd go, hey, you got the show today. I'm the co-host, you're the host. You take it in and out of breaks. Learn, grow. We get done with the show and he'd say, hey, you did a good job with this, or we need to work on this, here's some things to think about, that type of thing. I mean, people poured into me, Hal.
I had the same experience. I mean, that culture that we had there was amazing. When you go back and look at it, because they did believe that you could do it, and they were going to pour into and invest in that. At the same time, the standards were relentlessly high. They were not going to lower the standard, but they were going to raise you up to that standard. Now, day in and day out, you're one of the best in the business at what you do. Give us an update on what you're doing right now, what we can expect. Tell me more.
It's fascinating how the business has changed in terms of what we do. When I first started the website, we wrote. It was about writing. I wasn't a very good writer. I kind of taught myself along the way to write and leaned on resources. Now we've evolved. We're into podcasting. We're into video casting. We're multimedia. We're on a multimedia platform. We have a message board community that's like a family. People that hurt when somebody's hurting. You know, people looking on vacation for a restaurant recommendation. We're going to talk about it. Then we're going to talk good and bad about how the game went and how things are going with the team. It's its own little family and its own little community, which is awesome. It's like, it's a bar that never closes. Everybody just sends around and talks UT sports. So we've got that. I've got the Vol Network stuff that I'm doing. Still do some radio hits along the way. And I've got a staff now, gosh, of 5 people. Started out as just me. We're in a staff of 5 now. And it's fun. I mean, you know, it's...
How's the team looking?
They're good. They're good. I mean, Coach Heupel's been awesome. Great to work with. And He's brought a passion back. He's brought there's an entertainment value to the way they play. You go to the stadium and you think, man, they can beat anybody. It's been a while since you feel that way. That's a great feeling to know, hey, I'm going to go into the stadium. They got a chance to beat somebody, and I may get to be in that moment. I may get to help call that moment and create that historical point in time for whatever fan is out there listening and watching, and that's just an awesome feeling.
Well, you've done a fantastic job, and I just want to give you your flowers while you were here, because you do represent possibility. Because I remember when we were both trying to grow, and you didn't let go, you didn't give up, and now you're one of the greatest in our business.
Thank you, sir. That's very kind of you to say. I appreciate that. I'm blessed every day, and there's enough things in your life along the way to remind you that you count every blessing that you got. And as somebody said, are you asking for a blessing, or are you going to be a blessing? And try to be a blessing, because to have the career that I've had is not anything I ever envisioned when I stepped foot on the campus at the University of Tennessee in 1992. Never dreamed it would be where it's at right now. So I count my blessings every day.
For people who don't know, which probably are not many, what's the website?
Volquest.com.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Hal. I appreciate it, man.